Hey, what's up, board gamers? Welcome back to Game Brigade. If you're new here, thank you for joining me. Remember to hit that subscribe button and smash the like button so it helps me in the YouTube algorithm. Today on the show, I thought I would talk about the curating the collection again, because that's what we do here on the show. But also, I want to really focus in on some of the things that I look for when I'm either deciding if I want to keep a game in my collection or why I might want to cull a game from my collection. So I'm going to go through some points that might help you when you're thinking about whether or not this game is good, or maybe you're looking at buying a game and adding it to your collection. Some of the things I think about when I'm going through that process, as well as some of the things I go through in my mind when I'm thinking about maybe removing a game from my collection. So hopefully this is going to be an asset for you, and let's get going. So the first thing I just want to, this one's an obvious. So in terms of keeping a game in my collection, we're going to start with things of reasons why I would keep a game in my collection. But one of the ones that's obvious is if it's played a lot. I'm not going to be cutting any games from my collection if it's going to be hitting the table with some certain of a regularity, because those are games obviously we want to keep around and cover. But I wanted to make sure we covered the foundation of that early on. And with that, I also will consider games that have extreme high replayability options. So if there's a game that maybe I don't play it a lot, but every time I do play it, it's enjoyable, those are usually games that are pretty safe within my collection, because they either have ease of use of getting to the table, or they're always enjoyable. So again, if it's hitting the table a lot or it has a ton of replayability and I don't get bored of it easily, those are generally safe in my collection. So now we're going to get into more of the nitty gritty of reasons as to why I might keep a game in my collection and some of those things that kind of hold on to it. And the first one I want to talk about are games that have a sentimental connection. So this is something that you should not feel guilty about. If there's a game in your collection that you like for some random reason, whatever it may be. For example, my wife wanted me to put this, she actually told me this example and I forgot to get it. I have a classic game of Risk that I have held in my collection since I was 15 years old. It's the first board game that I ever bought. I still have it 30 years later. And I'm not really, I'm pretty almost there, that I still love. And I don't ever want to get rid of it. I also have my World of Warcraft board game. Not that I've actually really played that game much, but more that World of Warcraft was just a very big part of my life, for many years. So there are games that I have a sentimental hold on to that I just enjoy having in my collection. So it's okay that I don't get them to the table often, because having them in my collection does bring me some sort of joy. Now, this is one that has also caused me to remove games from my collection. But there are times where I will keep a game in my collection or seek a game to add to the collection because it completes a theme or a collection of a designer. So for example, Eric Lang with the Blood Rage trilogy. There are 3 games. You have Blood Rage, Rising Sun, and Ankh. That would be a reason. Maybe you own 1 or 2 of the 3 games, and maybe you decide you want to sync out the 3rd one. Alternatively, because you have all 3 and you enjoy having that complete collection in your collection, it might be a reason to hold on to it. Now, I have actually let go of my part of my collection. The only one I still maintain is, I don't know if you can see it because it's being blocked by Terraforming Mars, is Rising Sun. But I have let go of my other versions of that trilogy personally, because it didn't hold enough for me in terms of the complete collection. But there are other games that I've held on to, such as my Imperial Assault. I have the complete collection, and it's a relatively hard game to find. So I decide to hold on to that, for whatever reason that may be. Now, the next one will be one that I talk about quite a bit on the channel here. It's one that is an interesting kind of point. There are games that are in my collection that I don't necessarily play very often. They might even be games that I don't necessarily enjoy myself, but it's because of the gateway potential that this game has to introducing friends and family to my hobby, to show them that there's a wider world of board gaming than just, the standard, Milton Bradley, Hasbro like games. Those gateway games, whenever I'm looking of adding a game to my collection, if it hits a certain, points of like, wow, this is actually a great game, or it nails a lot of points, or in terms of a game that's already in my collection that does the same thing, those are ways that you can find a game that stays in my collection for an extended period of time. For an example, this is a game I actually do enjoy, but I don't play it regularly. But when I do have family over, especially my father-in-law, mother-in-law, Point Salad is a game that they are able to get to the table and play with us when I couldn't get them to play, say a game like Dune. Now that's an extreme example, but there are a lot of friends that I've brought over when I talk about that I play board games, and then they see the board game room and they're overwhelmed. And I say, it's okay, I got a game that you're going to love. And maybe I'll sit them down and show them Parks or Wingspan, games that are a little bit more palatable for tastes that are more of that lightweight game entry, but are great for those people. So those games are really good to keep in your collection. Now, I already kind of talked about this when I talked about Imperial Assault, but other games that I like to keep in my collection are games that are hard to replace. A lot of games are games that you can ship away and sell, and if you really want it again, you can always just rebuy it again. And for the most part, not always, but for the most part, you could kind of, pay the same coming and going. You might lose some money here on the shipping, but you could sell a game, get it out of your collection. If you want it again, you could always pick it up. But there are those out of print, hard to find games that I like to hold on to. So like Shadows of Camelot, I don't like getting rid of this game because I don't want to have to hunt it down if I decide I want to keep it again, or my Imperial Assault. Now that that game is out of print and it's hard to find a lot of the content, it would be, if I decide to let go of that game, it's going to be a final decision. Like that, I will have to make the decision at that point to fully be comfortable with letting that game go. So those are things that kind of make me keep a pause in terms of deciding if I want to keep a game or let a game go. Another one that really strikes me is, especially with the game groups that I like to host, sometimes we'll have game nights of just me and a friend, so it's just a 2-player experience. In other words, we've had upwards to 9 people. So having games that fit across a wide variety of player counts is also important. So whenever I'm looking at my collection, I always want to make sure I've got games that fit well at the 2 to 3 player count, the 4 to 5 player count, the 6 player count, and on occasion the 7+ player count. Now those are a little harder to find, and also play time can also be a factor, but I like to make sure that I've got a wide spread of games in my collection for whatever need I might have for my specific game. Now this one is more niche. It might not be something that you're totally interested in, but I know there are people who are fully interested in this, and that's if a game has excellent art and components. If a game has really deluxeified components and it makes it feel great bringing it to the table, those are games that I like to have in my collection, maybe versus a basic model. So an example of this would be the Castles of Burgundy Deluxe version from Awakened Realms, or even this Terraforming Mars big box that has all of the miniature for the Mars planet. I enjoy the table presence those give me. Now, alternatively, I am sacrificing a massive amount of board game real estate space when it comes to sections on the wall or in my cubbies, because the games go from about this big to this big. So those are things that are kind of, a niche decision. There are times where you can have games that are just beautiful games that you like to play. I have a friend who loves the game Canvas because he loves the way the game looks. That might not be a game that is for everyone, but if it brings you joy, if you enjoy playing it, those are reasons why you might want to keep it in your collection. And the last one as to why I might keep a game in my collection is if it's useful for a community or a gathering of events. And that one for me is actually my Blood on the Clock Tower game that I keep up here. That game has created a great community here locally where I have made a lot more friends that are way outside of my normal board gaming realm, who are people that actually don't even play board games, but they like that kind of game. Games that fit those random niches I love. So you could have games that are great for chess night. So let's say you've got a chess board that's great. You want to go to chess clubs, or you've got shuffleboard games or crokinole. These are games that are, sometimes kind of big for a collection, but are great for community events, gatherings, and whatnot. But there are also reasons to cull games. There's reasons. Now there's a lot of reasons why I want to keep games. I can make excuses as to why I need to keep a game, but you don't always have the space to keep all those games. You're going to have to make a cut somewhere, and this is where we're going to talk about those reasons now. And the one that I'm going to talk about first is one that I'm still guilty of, because I have a hard time cutting every game, and if I did this, I would have no games sometimes. But the ones that rarely hit the table, if at all, should be the first ones that you look at on your culling list. There are games that I haven't played in over 2 years, and for whatever reason, sometimes they just hold on to it, and then I kind of have to go back to my other reasons, like, does it hit a reason here, and why is it staying? For example, Everdell the Complete Collection. I haven't played the Complete Collection since I've gotten the Complete Collection. We've talked about that several times on the channel, where now getting the big box has made it more difficult to table for whatever reason. It's probably a mental block. So is there a reason that I should probably cull that game? I don't know. Obviously, I'm not here to talk about games culling, but these are things to consider when you're starting to think about trimming down your collection size or parsing it down for sanity's sake. One that I recently did with this point would be games that overlap similar themes, gameplay mechanics, and the like. Recently, I decided to let go of Eclipse Second Dawn of the Galaxy. I just had other games that were 4X, not even Space 4X, just 4X experiences that kind of felt the same way. And I saw someone who posted in an I'm in search of board game group, and they're like, I'm in search of Eclipse. And I said, you know what? I literally didn't think about selling this game until I read that post, but I'll sell it. And I sold it. Because when you think about it and you look at your collection, you're like, why am I going to play this game over this game? When am I going to play Eclipse over Twilight Imperium? Now, in that regard, time would be a big reason, because Eclipse plays in 3 to 4 hours and Twilight Imperium plays in 8 to 10 hours. But there's still some overlap there in terms of theming and mechanics and whatnot. So you're always having to kind of play that game. And you can make excuses like I did for a long time with Eclipse as to, well, I'm keeping it because it fits that shorter niche. But then there are other games that also fit that niche that are a little bit more different, that do something maybe a little bit more interesting, that I might want to take a look at, instead of having all the games that have somewhat similar, kind of parse them down. The next one that I would really highly consider cutting from my collections are games that are difficult to teach, especially to newer players. One that was basically an entire theme and designer has been culled from my collection for this reason was my Lacerda games, but specifically On Mars was my best example. On Mars was a game that I loved. I think I gave it a review of around an 8.9 or 8.8, which is extremely high for me. But every time I taught that game to a new set of players, and then would have to spend the entirety of the time playing the game and going over the rules, reminding people of the rules, it just became more of a job than enjoyment of a hobby. And so I eventually culled it, and I decided anytime there's a game that has such a heavy overhead that makes it less fun to table, they're not worth it for me anymore. So another one would be a good example would be games that have poor player counts. So there are games that will have, it's between 2 and 6 players, but really it's only good at 2 players. You want to make sure your games are good at a variety if you can. Having a game that has a very niche-y type of quality of play experience, and it has to be that specific kind of Goldilocks type experience, really limits the times you can get to that table. There has to be a lot of other reasons or factors to keep a game in your collection. And if I want to give you an example of one that in my opinion is kind of like that, would be Twilight Imperium. Twilight Imperium not only has way too long of a play time, is only good for me at 5 players minimum. Also, is hard to get people to play an extended period of time. It's a game that requires a very Goldilocks set of standards, and I know a lot of people who eventually have given up on that game or let it go. Now I hold on to it because there's sentimental reasons, and it's a good game for me, but I probably should get rid of it at some point. If I was honest with myself, we play it once a year at this point. I'm holding on to it morally for those sentimental reasons that I mentioned in the first section of this video. But there are reasons where you should really kind of start looking at games and being like, does this game play good at 2? Does it play good at 3? Does it play good at 4? You know, and if there's games that only play good at that Goldilocks number, it might be a game that might be worth consider culling from your collection. Limited replayability would be the next one I want to talk about. Wingspan was one for me. Wingspan was a game that my group loved. In 2020, we played this game to death. In fact, there was a Steam release. I've actually did 2 videos on the Steam release, and we played that game with my friends online, to the point that we eventually solved the game. We figured out the most efficient birds to pick, when you should get those birds, how to effectively place them, to the point that all of our scores were just ridiculously high, and it no longer was a challenge to play the game. We've effectively solved the game. I've also seen that in games like Scythe, and it's the reason why we don't play Scythe much anymore, because you've learned the combinations in the action sequencing that you should take to be the most effective, and it reduces the challenge those games can have. And those could be reasons as to why you would, at that point, then move on from the game. Now, Wingspan maintains in my collection because it's a game that I can easily teach without having to refresh the rulebook. I know the game basically by heart. And it's a great introduction game for my, lightweight gamers when I want to show them a new game that, in my opinion, is a great starter game. But Scythe, again, a game that I could easily see removed from my collection, and I only keep it because I have it all deluxeified, like painted and everything like that. So probably should also be going from my collection at some point. So the next one, and this is funny because there's one that's a brand new game, hotness right now. But if it's an inconvenient setup or has an inconvenient setup length, those are games that are going to make it more difficult to get to the table. It's going to be harder to convince your friends to play if it's going to take 30 minutes to set up. And the game that we just played was Andromeda's Edge. And that one was just a bear to set up and then a bear to put away. And really made you not want to have to break it out and play it again because of how inconvenient this one was to set up. And that alone had that game already on my cull list right now, only after one play, just because I didn't seem like it was worth the experience that I got from the experience of playing the game versus the hour it felt like the setup and teardown version of it. Alternatively, another reason I might want to cull a game, and I just actually did this, would be very poor component quality. If your game just does not feel good or it feels poor in quality, that might be a reason to get rid of it. And I actually did just do one of those. I can't remember the full name of the game. It was a game I did an unboxing for, and the game was so bad. It was like a Dragonlance game. If you search Dragonlance on my channel, you probably can find the unboxing video. But the cardboard was so thin, I think if you dropped a bit of water on the cardboard, it would just disintegrate. The quality was really poor. It seemed like they used the cheapest type of quality, and it didn't feel fun even looking at the game, let alone trying to play the game. And so I eventually sold that for $5. And the last reason that I would highly consider getting rid of games out of my collection, and I just recently did this with the sale of my Mythic Battles Ragnarok, are space constraints. The reality is board games, these boxes are big. They take up a lot of space, and a majority of gamers have a very vast library of games in the collection. And when we have games that have a ton of boxes and components, they can start to monopolize your space. And at some point, even if you don't want to get rid of a game, sometimes it's better to get rid of those big games that are taking up a ton of space so that you have a little bit of room to breathe and you can get things off the floor. One of the things I personally hate are board games on my floor, and when it starts getting there, I know that it's time to remove things out of the collection and get them off the floor effectively. I don't want to do that. So I just sold my Mythic Battles Ragnarok. I took $100 hit off of it, and I know that stinks to lose money on a game that was even unplayed at that point. I hadn't even opened it. but it feels better knowing that I don't have that sitting on my wall or my shelf anymore, and I can put things in its place, and I can kind of give another assessment. So my final thoughts, those are kind of all the reasons and points that I wanted to look at. But in reality, what I like to do is I take these kind of ideas, my positives of why I keep a game, the negatives of why I don't keep a game, and on occasion, usually maybe once a week at this point, I give a good long look at my walls, and I kind of look at a game and I ask myself these questions. Do I play this game a lot? Does this mean anything to me? Could I get this game back in my collection if I decided I want it? Is this taking up too much space? And eventually I will make a decision and pull a game off the shelf to be able to be sold. The one I did last night that kind of triggered this one was my my box for Marvel Dice Throne. I decided that I don't need this game in my collection anymore. I don't play it. I was only keeping it around, again, for those gateway-like games, but I have enough of those gateway games that I can keep that I can probably feel comfortable moving on for Marvel Dice Throne. And since I didn't purchase the other version in the last Kickstarter, I'm less attached to this one as I probably would have been otherwise. So these are the reasons as I weighed this video. I hope this is helpful for you as you are moving through your journey of curating your collection, making it feel unique to yourself, and make it so that you are always feeling joy when you're looking at your wall of games. I know that's my goal, is to always look at my wall and feel like I have made something I'm proud of, that I would love to play all of these games at any given moment. So again, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. My name is Brian from Game Brigade. If you enjoyed this channel, if you enjoy this type of content, hit the subscribe button. I try to do these topical points on occasion. I try to do them more often than not, sometimes less often lately, but we'll do more. We've been doing some more lately. So thank you guys for watching. I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.